Karen Corla. Tá dénóma dagam. Oh no, Cuig, no, Cahar. Yeah, Nish. I shouldn't have said anything actually. Taoiseach,
make use of it.
Taoiseach, your government has displayed incredible incompetence in recent days in dealing with migration and returns to Britain. Minister McEntee at the Justice Committee claimed that 80% of those applying for asylum in this state are coming from Britain via the north. At the weekend, your Oireachtas then carelessly jumped in 2 feet first, pointing to Britain's Rwanda deal and claiming that it had led to an increase in people crossing the border, despite him not having any evidence to that effect. His error of judgment was a gift to the Tory party, a Tory party desperate for a row with Europe, with Ireland, with anyone on the issue of migration. And then yesterday, Micheál Martin went on to tell a press conference in London that Minister McEntee's claim about asylum seekers crossing the border is not based on statistics, evidence or data. So the Minister for Justice says one thing, the Taoiseach contradicts her and says another, both, it seems, making claims without any supporting data. The incompetence is off the charts. At a time when we need calm and an assured response, we get panic. At a time when we need competence and clear communication, we get contradiction. And this has been a feature confirming the widespread view that your government is not on top of issues relating to migration, that nobody competent is in charge. Scrambling around to turn hotels, B&B's office blocks into direct provision centres or having tents line the length of Mount Street here in Dublin are not the hallmarks of a well-managed system. Taoiseach, Ireland is a welcoming, compassionate country and there is no room for racism here. We know that there are those who would seek to exploit this serious issue to sow division and hatred, and that is why clarity is so important. And the truth is that your government from the beginning has made a complete mess of the handling of this situation. We need an immigration system that is fair, efficient and enforced. A system with common sense that safeguards social cohesion and protects human rights. Both can be done in parallel and done effectively. However, your chaotic approach, as evidenced, is evidence that nobody is in charge and that your government really doesn't have a plan to get to grips with the situation. Tá chuig an rialtas maidir le inimirce trína céile. Tá daoine ag mothú nach bhfuil aon duine I gceannas maidir leis an neamh-ábalteacht idir an Tara McEntee agus Micheál Martin. So Taoiseach, your government says that you have an agreement with Britain. The British government say that you do not. Which is it? And if you do have such an agreement, has the Irish state made use of this agreement? And if not, well then why not? People want a system that is decent and fair, and they also expect the rules to be enforced. It seems from recent revelations this has not been a priority for Minister McEntee or for your government. So now we have a situation of confusion in government, contradiction and chaos between the Minister for Justice and the Taoiseach. Which of them, if either, are speaking correctly, Taoiseach? But not satisfied with that, you've actually managed to spread this confusion now between two governments about an agreement which exists or does not exist. Which is it, Taoiseach? And can you please bring clarity now to these questions here this afternoon?
Thank you very much, Deputy MacDonald. Taoiseach, please.
Well, Garmagat, and firstly let me agree with your comments in relation to this being a welcoming country, and let me agree with your comments in relation to there being no room for racism in the country. And I think it is important that we live in a country where the leader of the government and the leader of the opposition can come together in our national parliament and say that. And I think that's important, and I welcome that. Let me say this though, there is no confusion and there is clarity, because the reality of the situation is, as you know, and as you know better than most, we have a common travel area between the United Kingdom and between Ireland. And as you know, again, better than most I would imagine, that is a really important common travel area. It's something we value. And as you also know, that when Britain made the decision to leave the European Union, there was an agreement put in place, one that indeed has been confirmed by the British government today, in relation to an operating agreement for migrants, for refugees to be returned in both directions. So if somebody was coming here from the UK or indeed vice versa. It's also true to say, and again a statement of fact, that in March our High Court in a ruling said that there wasn't an adequate legislative basis for this. And the Minister for Justice has moved very swiftly and with the full support of all members of government to clarify that and to close what I've described as a legal loophole. I very much welcome that. I have no intention whatsoever of this country being dragged in to politics in Britain. I'm very well aware of the politics of Britain. They can have their migration policy and they can do what they wish in relation to that. We have ours. And ours is a rules-based, firm migration system that endeavours to provide assistance to people in humanitarian need, but also one that has to make it clear to people that if they don't have a right to be here, that they need to be asked and ensured that they'll leave more quickly. And there have been a number of measures taken by Minister McEntee to bring that about. So this is not, for anybody watching this in Britain or in Ireland, this is just one of a number of measures we're taking to make sure we come at this issue from all angles so that we can properly address what is a very serious situation in Ireland and across the European Union. The legislation is one element, but so too is the decision that the Minister made to introduce faster processing for 10 countries, designated safe countries. Also the decision that she made last week to add Nigeria on this occasion to that list, because we know the highest percentage of people coming here at the moment is from Nigeria, and we know as night follows day when we introduce faster processing, we know that the number of people coming from that country falls, and we've seen that time and time again in recent weeks. It's also why the Minister's made the decision to free up from desk jobs in immigration the work of 100 Gardaí, so that they can now be working more closely with the PSNI on important collaboration between the PSNA and Garda Síochána, and also that they can be working on deportations. And I must say, I do welcome, in the midst of the politics of Britain, I do welcome the comments of the Northern Ireland Secretary of State yesterday, where he very clearly said that he was, in his words, comfortable with the Irish proposal, and he talked about the importance of the two governments working together in terms of protecting the common travel area from any abuse. Next week in Dublin, it's already scheduled that the Common Travel Area Coordination Group was due to meet anyway. That'll be an opportunity for the Minister to engage with them, and this is a group that brings together officials from our two jurisdictions as well. In relation to the 80% or the over 80%, to be clear on this as well, as you know, and I presume you support, we have an open border. People come back and forth over the border. That's invaluable for peace and for prosperity on the island. But it's also important we listen to people on the front line. It's important that we listen to the men and women working in the IPO, in the International Protection Office, who tell the Minister, who then has the good form to tell this House and a committee that they are now seeing a very significant increase in the number of people who've arrived seeking protection and have come from the UK. And I think it would have been an irresponsible government that wouldn't have shared that, because we had seen a lot of activity at the airport. We took strong measures at the airport in terms of people arriving without passport, Garda checks and the likes. And we always have to be agile and flexible in terms of her response. So there's no disagreement in government in relation to the fact that we're seeing a very significant increase of people presenting at our International Protection Office who have come here from the UK.
So, you claim now that there is clarity with the British government. You might alert us as to when you received that clarification from the British Prime Minister. Have they clarified that they do in fact have a legal obligation to accept returns? They have acknowledged operational arrangements, but they have not gone so far as to acknowledge a legal. Can you confirm for me that that is in fact the case? And while you're at it, can you just add some more detail, please, to what this... I'm fully aware of the common travel area, as are we all. I'm also aware that Brexit happened and was a huge disruptor, so please give us more clarity on this. And can you also clarify, because I asked you a question around the confusion within your own government. You have the Taoiseach contradicting the Minister for Justice, saying that a claim that she made is not based on fact, data or statistics. Yeah. So can you clarify for us, Taoiseach, which, if either, the Minister for Justice or the Taoiseach are actually speaking accurately? And by the way, the mishandling of this by your government, by your Taoiseach, has been a gift to the Tories.
Time is up
And if
now,
you follow
please.
politics over there, as no doubt you do, I have no doubt that you are very well aware of that fact too.
Well, what I am very well aware of is not allowing this country become a pawn in any politics in the United Kingdom, and I think that's something I hope you and I can agree on. Because as political leaders in this Parliament, I hope you'd also agree that we have every right to set our own migration policy, and we have every right and every obligation to make sure that that migration policy is rules-based, is efficient, is effective. And we've also every right that when countries enter agreements, that those agreements are honoured. And this is a country that honours our agreements. What I've said very clearly is the British government has acknowledged that there are operational arrangements in place. I welcome that fact. I'm very clear that those operational agreements are in place under the Common Travel Area. And I'm very clear that we're going to legislate to have absolute clarity so that it can work. But I'm also really clear that it's only one of a number of things we need to do. And I think the more significant thing that's been done in recent weeks is not actually the legislation today, but is the faster processing time, because we know that that is what happens, that is what helps make a very positive impact in terms of reducing the numbers of people coming to our country. In relation to the 80%, and very briefly, that is the figure based on what the Minister for Justice was told, and the government and all members of the government accept and understand that. The point that Taoiseach was making was not in contradiction. He's making the point there isn't a definitive count taken of the number of people that go over the border. You know that, I know that. But this is based on the information that we see in the International Protection Office, and we do well to listen to the people on the front line processing those applications.
That's not an answer.
Taoiseach, the recent debate on immigration has been dominated by disinformation. And that's regrettable, because it's essential we stick to the facts. Because when we talk about immigration, we're talking about people who are seeking refuge here in a country that is a welcoming country. And disinformation is making this country less safe for everyone. Communities are suffering because of far-right activity and because of a rise in racism, and we all condemn that. But Taoiseach, you need to get a handle on this, because your government's immigration policy has failed. And the clearest evidence of that failure is just around the corner. Hundreds of people now sleeping in tents and makeshift shelters in desperately unsanitary conditions on Mount Street. I was there again this morning, meeting with some of those people, also speaking with local residents and traders who are sympathetic to the desperate plight of those in tents, but also deeply frustrated at the deteriorating situation, with more and more tents each day, no access to sanitation, no sign of any action from government. It is inhumane and unsustainable. You have no accommodation strategy, even while big public buildings like Baggot Street Hospital sit scandalously idle nearby. So Taoiseach, you're not even on top of the situation when it comes to reliable data on immigration. The Minister for Justice has been unable to give accurate figures on migration, and it's extraordinary to rely on, apparently on anecdote, when we see so much disinformation circulating and when we see cynical attempts to turn a delicate situation into an election issue. There is a clear need for EU states to act in concert on this, but the migration pact announced by the EPP, your party's European grouping, is incapable of addressing the underlying causes of inward migration into Europe, and it has glaring deficiencies on human rights. Your predecessor refuted the allegation that this amounts to a European Rwanda scheme, but it seems you're now not just looking to introduce something like the Rwanda scheme, but rather to enforce the Rwanda scheme itself. Last month, we've just spoken about this, saw a High Court decision that Ireland cannot designate Britain as a safe third country for the purpose of returning people seeking asylum. And you may have had approval today at Cabinet to introduce emergency legislation to redesignate Britain as a safe third country. But there are two serious issues with that proposal. First, under Section 21 of the International Protection Act, a safe third country is only safe for a particular applicant if that country is willing to readmit them. And we cannot force Britain, or any other country for that matter, to take back applicants whom we turn away. And we've heard about an operational agreement, but we need clarity on what that is and what obligation it places on Britain. And second, Taoiseach, in that High Court case, it was argued that the Rwanda policy would make it impossible to designate the UK as a safe third country. Now, the court did not have to deal with that argument because it was then hypothetical. But since then, most regrettably, that policy has become the law in Britain. And Deputy O'Riordan and I, together with Westminster British Labour MP Stella Creasy, have for months been raising concerns about the Rwanda bill and its undermining of the Good Friday Agreement's requirement for equivalence of human rights protections north and south of the border. You should have listened to us then. And Taoiseach, do you agree now that if the Rwanda policy is fundamentally incompatible with human rights law, as we say, as the UN High Commissioner says, then how can you possibly designate the UK as safe while that policy now remains law in Britain?
I want to thank Deputy Batchik for the question. So firstly, we do have data, and we do gather data in relation to the International Protection Office, but we can't, and I'm not suggesting you are, we can't ignore the reality of the island that we live on and the peace settlements that we have on this island. So we don't count the number of people who come over the border by nationality or anything else. We know that. But what we do see, excuse me, Deputy, you know this well too. What we do see, and again, you know this, I would imagine, Deputy Batchik, what we do see is when people present at the International Protection Office, very experienced staff who have done incredible work in very intense environments, carrying out interviews and the likes, and garnering data, not anecdote, garnering data and information in relation to how people have come to our country. They are telling government, and we are telling you, that the overwhelming majority of people now presenting in that office have come from the UK or down from Northern Ireland. Now, I hear every week when I come into this, we'd like an honest and open debate about migration. Well, here it is. There it is. That is the honest and open reality. Now let's discuss how we can address those issues. Let's discuss how we can work more closely between the PSNI and An Garda Síochána. Let's discuss how we can work to protect the common travel area from abuse. Let's work to see how we can, and I welcome your comments, work at an EU level, because I don't believe we can go it alone. And we may differ on some of the detail of the Migration Pact, and I look forward to the opportunity to debate that in the House. But the ultimate need to overhaul EU rules is one that I very much agree on as well. In relation to Mount Street, I believe the way you've described the situation is fair. There's two aspects to Mount Street. The first needs to be to provide everybody who is intense, vulnerable people with access to accommodation and a safer setting as quickly as possible. And I know that my colleague Minister O'Gorman is working very actively on that with a number of other agencies and organisations. The second thing, though, has to be, and that's happening, and the second thing has to be, you don't have to shake your head, it's happening in my constituency. The second thing is this: once we clear Mount Street and provide people with a safer setting and access to sanitation, we do need to make sure that the laws of the land are applied, and it's not allowed to happen again, because we don't live in a country where makeshift shanty towns are allowed just to develop. We don't live in a country where we don't, and we can't, because the laws of the land are there. So I'm telling you very clearly, the plan is to provide the people on Mount Street with better accommodation and access to sanitation, and then not to allow a situation where ad hocery can come about in terms of the development of accommodation. I think that's a really important thing to do. And I think the people on Mount Street and the people in your constituency, Deputy, would think that's an important thing to do as well. In relation to the legislation that the Minister will bring forward, the Minister today received permission to draft. The Minister intends to enact legislation by the end of this month, and she will outline in that legislation how she intends to respond to the issues that were brought to the fore by the High Court in March of this year. And I believe there is a way of doing that. So too does the Attorney General, the Minister, and all of the government. And in relation to Rwanda and everything else, it's not the policy of this government, but we do obviously have to make sure our rules are enforced, and it's really important. People in this country want to see a rules-based migration system.
Deputy Batchik.
Well, Taoiseach, I raised with you three specific points on which I sought a response from you and on which your government has failed in its approach. First, on the provision of accommodation, of safe shelter, and I'm glad to hear you say that safe shelter will be provided to those currently forced to sleep in tents on Mount Street, but we need to know when. I've been engaging, as of all the other local reps, with the Minister O'Gorman on this, but we're deeply frustrated, as are residents, as are the men themselves on this in tents. So we need to know when that will happen. Secondly, the data issue. We need to know where that data is coming from. We understand there is no provision currently for gathering the data on how people enter. We need to know more than just conjectured figures plucked from the air by the Minister, and that's crucial in order to create that fair, efficient and rules-based migration process that we in Labour want to see also. And on the Rwanda bill, we need clarity on that too, because you say an operational arrangement is in place with Britain, but what is it? There's a clear difference of approach coming forward from British Prime Minister Sunak on this. Will you publish that agreement, and what obligation will it impose on the British government? And, you know, we're all conscious, of course, of the importance of the common travel area. And Taoiseach, may I say, after Brexit, all parties were united in wanting to see no hard border imposed. And it's baffling to see some Republican parties apparently now reneging on that ideal of no hard border on the island of Ireland. And that's deeply unhelpful. So Taoiseach, we need clarity on the issue of accommodation provision, on data,
Thank you, Deputy,
and on how you are going to deal with the impact of the Rwanda bill.
Taoiseach.
So I think it's fair, objectively fair, to say the government failed on accommodation. I don't think there's a community across Ireland who believes that, because if you look at the scale of challenge this country has faced and the amount that we have done as a people to provide accommodation in very difficult circumstances, I think that does need to be absolutely acknowledged. And there are no easy solutions when it comes to accommodation. But quite frankly, I don't believe, again, I'm not suggesting you do this, but all too often in our migration debates in Ireland, we start the migration discussion from an accommodation supply point of view. That's the wrong place to start. We need to start from a migration rules-based system, the efficiency of our system, that people who don't have a right to be here are asked to leave more quickly, that we can actually stand over the rules that are in place, because that's what people are getting, I believe, right across this country frustrated about. They want to help people in need, but they also want to know that there is a functioning rules-based system, as there is, and as Minister McEntee has taken a number of measures to make more effective. In relation to the data issue, I mean, I'm very confident that the information that has been provided to the government in relation to processing times is exactly what people are seeing in the international protection offices. The department's firm assessment, based on the experience of staff and others working in the field, and based on the material they're gathering at interviews, is that over 80% of applicants applying for protection have entered over. Pardon me? That's not.
No.
Sorry, I speak for
let's
the
not have
government.
an agreement.
I speak for the government that the Taoiseach is a part of, and I'm very confident in saying that the Taoiseach, myself as Taoiseach, and all members of the government and all parties in the government are very clear in relation to this. The Taoiseach made a valid point yesterday that doesn't contradict Minister McEntee's point.
Thank you very much. Deputy Michael Lowry, please.
Subsidised provision of fibre broadband across all regions of the country is critical to Ireland's economic and social progress. Despite being plagued by delays, National Broadband Ireland has stated that it is confident that all 227 deployment areas will be completed by early 2028. While the broadband project may be almost 4 years away from its projected completion, existing commercial suppliers of broadband, like Imagine, which services large parts of the country, now have an immediate and serious financial viability problem. Imagine are now closely examining their immediate future in the market, and the outlook for them is bleak without government support. Imagine is one of the key suppliers of high-speed broadband using fixed wireless access technology. They currently have 47,000 customers across every county in Ireland. 2,400 of those customers are in Tipperary. These are predominantly rural connections. 40,000 of their customers fall into the defined national broadband intervention area, which ensures that they will be connected to high-speed broadband within 4 years if the projected completion dates are met. If Imagine is forced to wind down in the coming months without a planned transition to NBI, there will be a blackout for an unsuspecting 47,000 customers. The impact of this would be catastrophic. Allowing the unplanned wind down of this commercial provider would set back the impacted regions across the country for years. The threat posed to businesses, to emergency and medical services, to schools, to remote workers, to farmers, and to all local service providers is incalculable. Community centres, local charities and sports clubs would lose an invaluable local link. Communicating online with loved ones abroad would almost become impossible. Homes and businesses that depend on having reliable contact would be cast adrift. Positive advancements made around rural regions of the country would begin to evaporate. Restoring them could realistically take decades. It would plunge large parts of the country back to pre-broadband days. Government needs to give serious consideration to this very real eventuality. Taoiseach, I'm asking that you and your relevant ministers would urgently meet with existing suppliers such as Imagine. Government needs to identify a constructive plan that will ensure the continuation of high-speed broadband services while work is underway to roll out the national plan. Provisions must be made for the real possibility that thousands of people in Tipperary and across the country are facing blackout if private broadband suppliers pull the plug and the only services currently available to the customers.
Thank you. Taoiseach.
Thanks very much, Ceann Comhairle. I want to thank Deputy Lowry for raising this important issue, and I suppose let's let's begin at a point of absolute agreement. The government doesn't wish in any way, shape or form to see any rural area, or indeed any area in Ireland, least of all in County Tipperary, losing connectivity. In fact, that's the exact opposite of what we've been working to achieve and making good progress on over the last number of years with the National Broadband Plan, which really at its heart is being specially designed to support rural and remote areas that were at risk without intervention of getting left behind. And ultimately, as you know, that National Broadband Plan will connect 564,000 rural properties, and I'm very pleased that it is now rolling out, that it's rolling out on time, that it's rolling out on budget. But I do take seriously today the point that you make, and you'll understand why I can't comment on an individual private company. I do think it's fair to say any commercial operator would, of course, have been aware of the government's National Broadband Plan. There are regulatory processes that do need to be observed, but I do know that the Department of Communications has been engaging with the company, and I would encourage that engagement to continue for the reasons that you've outlined. I also know that the company has been engaging with Comreg, which again is part of its regulatory obligations, because our absolute concern here is that there can't be disruption to consumers, and any such disruption has to be absolutely mitigated against and minimised for all the reasons that you've said, whether that's remote working hubs, remote learning hubs, farmers, small businesses, homes, community groups, all those who have come to rely on and have developed their business or their family life around the provision of broadband and the very positive impact that has had. So, for my part, on the basis of you raising this here in the Dáil today, I will speak with Minister Ryan about it and Minister Smith, whom I know is behind me here as well, and I know their department is abreast of the situation, and there is engagement between the Department of Communications and Comreg, and I'll come back to you and see if we can provide you with an update.
Deputy Lowry.
I welcome the fact that you acknowledge that we can't have disruption and that it should be avoided. So there's a myriad of issues that threaten people if Imagine and the other broadband suppliers decide to leave the market in advance of the arrival of the national broadband rollout. So we must do everything possible to avoid that scenario. And at the moment, we're drifting towards that scenario. And I'll be here representing the 2,400 householders in Tipperary and others from other counties if something is not done. I know there's meetings going ahead, and I know Minister Smith has been in consultation with them, but we need a bit of action. And, you know, even in your own reply there to me, I can see that it's complicated, it's complex, and there are so many agencies involved. So there needs to be a political input here to get a solution to ensure that there's not an interim period where 47,000 homes are left without broadband. So I'd ask you to follow up and I'd ask Minister Smith to redouble his efforts to find a solution and to find it fairly quickly.
Deputy Lowry, Taoiseach.
Sorry for raising this issue, and Minister Smith has been here to hear the comments directly, and Minister Smith and Minister Ryan will continue to keep you updated on this. Obviously, as I've said, I can't certainly comment on an individual company for obvious reasons. There is a regulatory process and engagement with the department and with Comreg, but I do, as Taoiseach of this country, want to make sure that we don't have a scenario where rural areas lose connectivity, because we're all trying to move forward with the rollout of the National Broadband Plan to make sure that connectivity is brought to every part of this country, and most particularly to rural and regional Ireland. I should just take the opportunity while it's here to say that County Tipperary is getting an investment of €118 million under the National Broadband Plan. 31,000 premises in the county will be connected in total. Over 17,000 of those premises can now already order, and as recently as just last Friday, we saw 3,000 homes, farms and businesses in care become ready to order in areas like Ardfinnan, Clogheen and Burncourt. It's now also live in places like Tipperary Town, Clonmel, Care, Carrigan-Shore, Cashel, Nina. So in the county that you represent, the vast majority of homes and businesses to be served are now either ready to order or are under construction. 57% of the premises due to be served by the National Broadband Plan are ready to order now, and 27% are under construction. But I take that point you make about the interim and the disruption, and we'll continue to engage on that.
Very much, Taoiseach. Deputy Thomas Pringle.
Taoiseach, I know many of us in this chamber are extremely concerned about the reactionary right-wing content, conspiracy content and misogynistic content that has become increasingly popular on social media in recent years, and which is starting to filter in and contribute to societal issues in Ireland today. Unfortunately, such views have always been present in society. However, due to social media, it is now possible to create and spread anti-progressive views on a more widely and rapidly than ever before. Taoiseach, I want to bring to your attention a recent study from DCU's Anti-Bullying Centre, which has shown that the algorithms used by social media platforms such as YouTube and TikTok are rapidly amplifying misogynistic and male supremacist content, as well as reactionary right-wing and conspiracy content, much of which is anti-transgender as well. The researchers of the study found that every single male social media account was fed masculinist, anti-feminist and other extremist content, irrespective of whether they sought out this content. What's even more concerning was that they all received this content within the first 23 minutes of the experiment. This is extremely frightening and opens our eyes to the type of toxic and problematic content young boys and men in Ireland are exposed to every day. TikTok has over 1.5 billion active monthly users, almost half of which are under the age of 25. Recent statistics show a concerning increase in the incidence of sexual and gender-based harassment in schools and among young people in Ireland. According to Women's Aid, there has been an increase in the number of women reporting experiences of sexual and gender-based abuse and harassment both online and off. There is no doubt that there is a link between the growing abuse faced by women and girls and the recent rise in male supremacist content online as well. It has been shown that such content has also served as a gateway into far-right spaces. The study shows that many male accounts were also recommended reactionary right-wing content with a focus on anti-trans and anti-woke content, and few were also even shown conspiracy content, often regarding large-scale government control. This is incredibly alarming, and it is clear that the recent rise of the far right in Ireland goes hand in hand with the rise of this content on TikTok and YouTube as well. The DCU study noted that anti-feminist, male supremacist and far-right narratives merge together into a seamless and mutually compatible set of talking points, collectively underpinned by the logic of conspiracy. The research paper is a worrying and disturbing read, and I was truly horrified to discover the type of content and messages that young Irish men are being exposed to. It really is no wonder that we are seeing the devastating effects of this in reality. Messages like masculinity is under threat because of female empowerment and government brainwashing, or that the idea of the family is threatened by LGBTQI+ rights, or the suggestion that depression isn't a real mental illness and it makes men weak, are incredibly concerning. This is a serious problem, Taoiseach, and it links in with the earlier question we've had here today as well, I think, and one that is becoming only becoming more and more mainstream as well. So how are you going to address it? Thank you.
Taoiseach.
Yeah, I want to thank Deputy Pringle for raising what he's right is an extraordinarily serious issue, and just in listening to your final few words there, it's a real reminder of all of the progress that we've been beginning to make together as a society in destigmatising some issues and promoting equality, and the risk that being undone or damaged by online dangerous use of social media is very pertinent. I must say I met the DCU Anti-Bullying Centre in my past capacity in government. I'm very grateful for the work they do, and I'll make it my business to familiarise myself with the report that you've just raised. I mean, online safety for children, for young people, and indeed for all citizens is a key priority for government. In fact, I was only speaking to Minister Martin about this as recently as today. It is an issue that I know she takes very seriously, but indeed all of government, and I think everybody in this House needs to take seriously as well. That's why we did pass the Online Safety and Media Regulation Act in 2022, and it's why we did establish a new online safety and media regulator called Commission Amon. There's no question that there is an issue with people, and children in particular, being exposed to harmful online content, and I don't think we can just leave it up to the companies to do the right thing here, and I think that's why we put a legislative basis in place. So protection of children has to be a key priority. Under the new legislation, Commission Amon is now putting in place a binding online safety code that's particularly focused on ensuring the safety of children and young people from harmful online content. As Ireland's Digital Services Coordinator under the new EU Digital Services Act, on Commission Amon supports the European Commission in the enforcement of this landmark regulation in respect to the largest online services. This was a major piece of legislation at a European level. Commissioner Amon is now running a Spot It, Flag It, Stop It campaign in relation to harmful online content, including child sex abuse material, advising people to report it to the platforms or indeed to hotline.ie. Hotline.ie is funded by the EU and by internet service providers. But we need to, as I say, go further than this. The public consultation in respect of online safety codes closed at the end of January, and Commissioner Amon is now currently analysing the feedback from the public consultation. The draft code does set out the actions that video sharing platforms like TikTok, like Facebook and like Instagram must take to protect the interests of particularly younger users. For the first time, there will be, for the first time in the draft codes, there will be specific obligations around age verification, which I think is important. The draft code also provides requirements to operate effective risk mitigation measures in relation to profiling algorithms and age-inappropriate recommendations, some of the issues that you've raised as well. Under our legislation, harmful online content includes online content linked to 45 criminal offences, including harassment, threats and certain harmful content not linked to criminal offences, such as serious cyberbullying, the promotion of eating disorders, self-harm and indeed suicide. Failure to comply with an online safety code can lead to the imposition of a very significant financial sanction, Ceann Comhairle, of up to €20 million, or 10% of your turnover, and continued non-compliance can lead to criminal sanction for company directors.
Pringle.
Thanks, Taoiseach, for your answer. You know, the one thing that we can do in terms of is the algorithms that the companies use, and you can target them, and putting age profiles and age barriers and stuff like that there on accounts is all grand. It's the algorithms that are the target, and that's what we should be targeting. And if we were serious about protecting young people, and that's what we would be doing. You mentioned also in your response, Taoiseach, that the ban against harmful content and the online safety code and stuff like that there. How many prosecutions have actually taken place in relation to that at this stage? You know, because I think that would be very interesting to see how they actually are happening and how they're actually performing, if it is performing at all. Because what's here, plain to be seen here, is that these companies are all based here in Ireland. They all have their headquarters here in Ireland. They have data centres here in Ireland, but yet we use that they use those algorithms to target young people, and we can actually act to make that happen.
To Deputy Pringle, look, I think the approach we need to take to this is we need to hit them where it hurts, in their pocket, in their financial balance sheet, and that's what we intend to do under legislation that I imagine you in fairness probably supported, and I think a lot of people right across this House supported as well, because it's not just about asking the companies nicely, do they wish to do things. This is far too serious an issue for our children. It's far too serious an issue for our country. It's far too serious an issue for so many public policy areas, and indeed on occasion for democracy. Social media can bring about incredible benefits, platforms I'm known to use, but also there needs to be protections in place and obligations legally on these companies and sanctions if they don't comply. That's what we intend to do through Commissioner Amon and through turning now these draft safety codes into full online safety codes with full legislative effect shortly as well. The codes aren't in yet, so in answer to the prosecution answer, that is the truthful answer. The consultation finished at the end of January. Commissioner Amon is now analysing them, and the process of progressing them is ongoing and needs to proceed with urgency. There are, though, a number of European investigations, European Commission investigations under the Digital Services Act, including a live investigation into what they call TikTok's recommender systems, and whether that issue of the algorithm does indeed protect children or not. But I do want to finally assure Deputy Pringle that in the draft online safety codes in this country, that issue around the algorithm and profiling algorithms is something that will be addressed.